careful. You can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. Carmen, thank you so much. I've got to say, of all the introductions I've ever had, that one by far was the most recent. I got to say, after all these great speakers, I feel a little bit like Zsa Zsa Gabor's 8th husband on their honeymoon. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just wondering now if I can make it interesting. You in the back can think about that for a moment, if you like. You know, Laura, thank you so much for putting this together. A couple of weeks ago, I got a call from Laura, and she says, "Hey, Jason, I'm with the Tea Party in the Carolinas. Got to ask you a question." And I said, "Sure, what's that?" And she says, "Do you believe in free speech?" And I said, "Sure." She says, "How about giving one?" Now, I know Laura and the gang here wanted somebody who was young, articulate, good-looking, had high name ID. Unfortunately, Beverly Perdue couldn't make it tonight. No. Actually, the truth is, I, Jason Lewis, have the heart of a liberal. I keep it in a jar on my desk at the office, and right before I go into the studio, talking to my wife before I left for the Carolinas the day before yesterday, and I said, "Lee, did you ever in your wildest dreams think I would be in the Carolinas speaking in front of a tea party with a wonderful group of people?" And she looked at me for a second and said, "You've never been in my wildest dreams." I thought that was a little bit harsh. You know that Hillary, once she became Secretary of State, she had to have a little talk with Chelsea. Before Chelsea got married, she says, "Look, we're going to be back in the media spotlight again, so I've got to ask you a question, Chelsea. It's kind of personal, but it might come up." She said, "Well, you're young and you're away from home, and, well, Chelsea, have you had sex yet?" Chelsea stopped for a moment and said, "Not according to Dad." You know, Joe Biden thinks sleeping with the president is attending a cabinet meeting. So, it is great to be here. It's great to be back in the Carolinas, especially at such an important juncture in our country. We really are at a crossroads. You know, 30 years ago, Ronald Reagan talked about a rendezvous with destiny and bringing our country together and starting anew again. Well, we better start anew again because we are in a whole lot of hurt right now. We are on the road to default. Not unlike a third world banana republic. This country's going to look like Portugal, it's going to look like Greece, it's going to look like Ireland, only bigger. A $14 trillion debt, and the president's next 10-year budget blueprint adds $10 trillion more. You know, a trillion, you know what a trillion seconds is? A trillion seconds is 38,000 years. We might be in over our heads just a tad here, gang. And so, the president, you know, doubling down on the mistakes of the previous administration, let's be honest, we have had a bipartisan problem in spending in this country for about 3 decades, actually since Reagan left the White House. And when Hank Paulson, the Bush token Democrat in their administration, demanded that we had to bail out Wall Street, we had to substitute bailouts for bankruptcy, or God knows what would happen. Well, we did. God knows what happened. Here we are. Here we are in a country that doesn't reward success, it rewards failure. Here we are in a country that paralyzes entrepreneurship and subsidizes inefficient firms, and then we sit here and wonder why the economy isn't taking off. Here we are in a country whose central bank, Federal Reserve, has had its foot on the gas on the money supply, and in February, food prices rose the fastest in 36 years. Interest rates have been flat, zero. We've had the mother of all stimulus plans. Prior to Barack Obama's, the mother of all stimulus plans was called Fannie and Freddie. That said, go ahead and write bad mortgages. Don't worry, the government and the taxpayer will bail those mortgages out. So what did we do? We had a stimulus plan. We had affordable housing mandates, courtesy of Barney Frank. We had housing subsidies. We had artificially low interest rates. That is the very definition of an artificial stimulus. And what happened to housing? It skyrocketed. It quintupled. It was artificial wealth. And when housing prices got so high nobody could afford them, what happened? The bubble burst. Those of you that follow economics may have heard of Ludwig von Mises and Austrian economics. What we've witnessed here are classic economic bubbles. We had a bubble in tech stocks because of easy money and fiscal stimulus. We had a bubble in housing, and it burst. And now we've got a bubble in treasury bills and commodities with gold soaring. And I remember the last time gold was doing this. I remember the last time interest rates were going up. I remember Jimmy Carter. And those young people out here, if you didn't get a chance to live through Jimmy Carter, you might get a second chance. Because that's about where we are. And in comes Ronald Reagan. And what does Ronald Reagan do when he inherits this mess? He tells the Federal Reserve and Paul Volcker, I want you to wring inflation out of the economy. I want no more artificial bubbles. I want you to bring the prices down, gasoline, food, you name it. Inflation then was running almost 13%, and we're headed in that direction, I guarantee it. And so Volcker did that. And Reagan was unpopular for that. What did Reagan do? He deregulated. There was no Dodd-Frank bill. There were no cap on salaries. Reagan let and unleashed the entrepreneurial market capitalism spirits. And then what did he do? He cut taxes. And you know, we had a downturn. We had a tough downturn in 81 and 82. But by 1983, we were growing double digits. By 1984, he's reelected. He's reelected in a landslide over Walter Mondale. By the way, I talked to the guy that voted for Mondale the other day in Minnesota. He still hasn't forgiven me. But what have we done? We had the bailout. We had spending during the Bush years. 80% government spending went up during the Bush tenure. So what does President Obama do? He doubles down on what Bush did. He doubles down on an artificial stimulus plan. You know, folks, there's a fundamental fallacy of this demand-side Keynesian pump priming economics. If the government spends, you don't. There is no spending crisis. The next time you see Paul Krugman or somebody else, or Robert Reich, talk about priming the pump, we've got to get the consumer back, ask them where they're going to get the money. It is a zero-sum game. When governments don't invest, governments consume. They consume your investment for their investment. They supplant your wisdom for their wisdom. So I ask you, if money is left in the private sector, and we get venture capital going, and people loan to businesses, and you get the next Facebook, you get the next Google, whatever, that's going to be a tad more productive than, oh, I don't know, the bridge to nowhere? That's going to be a tad more productive than, dare we say, even a quote-unquote high-speed rail line from Raleigh to Charlotte that's going to shave off an entire 13 minutes? In the final analysis, there's only two ways for people to get money. We can all become more productive, we can all work better, produce more, and we can all, a rising tide can lift all boats, with everybody being more productive. We can only be more productive if there's private capital left in the private markets. That's the key. Here's a news flash for our friends in Washington. The truck driver is a lot more productive when somebody else buys in the truck. But if the government is soaking up all that private capital, if they're killing incentive with high taxes, the productivity in the private sector drops. So what is the other way to get money then? If the productivity is dropping in the private sector and we're not earning more, the rising tide is not happening, what's the other way to get money? Print it, or you hire a congressman to take it from somebody else. And that's exactly what we're doing. You know, there was a great French statesman, back when the French had statesmen, by the name of Frederick Bastiat. Ever heard of him? Anybody ever read The Law? The cliche? Yeah. Bastiat said, see if the government takes from someone that they own, something that they own, and gives it to someone who doesn't own it. See if the government takes money from people who have it and gives it to someone to whom it does not belong. See if the government then does that, the very same thing that you could not do without committing a crime. Now that, you got to understand something here. The modern entitlement state is at war with the criminal code. It's at war with the Constitution. If indeed we have the right to health care, if we have the right to education, the right to mass transit, why do we bother to put people in jail when they're on the street saying, I'm a little short on cash, give me what you got? I have a right to it. There's no such thing as the right to somebody else's money, a right to health care, to force doctors to work or providers. You don't have a right to anything except your life and the ability to produce what you can. That's what you've got a right to, and of course, the property you've accumulated. The property you've accumulated.